Hi, this is David Adler. Before we start our podcast today, I wanted to talk to you about one of our great sponsors, Go West. It's a must-attend event in Canada for event professionals. It's produced in partnership with BizBash, and it's going to be one of those industry events that you really don't want to miss. There will be relevant education, experiential moments, and most importantly, the opportunity to meet industry influencers and engage with like-minded event professionals. So for more information, go to gowestevents.ca. That's gowestevent.ca. I look forward to seeing you there myself.
Welcome to Gather Geeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Welcome to Gather Geeks. David is away this week. Our guest today is Dan Mannix, CEO of the agency CSM Lead Dog. The agency has worked with clients including Oprah, Hulu, NBC, Ben & Jerry's, and other household names, and we've covered a number of its events in BizBash. His background is in sports, and he was director of special events at the NBA before starting Lead Dog Marketing Group, a precursor to his current company. Dan joined us in our studio to talk about a number of things, including how brands should spend marketing money, and a corollary, why events aren't always the best answer, developing smart and engaging event concepts, and some very specific instructions for his team on event day. And yes, we are going to talk about Oprah. So let's take a listen. Dan, welcome to Gather Geeks.
Thank you.
So we are excited to have this conversation with you because you're bringing the agency perspective. And maybe we can just start by talking about how you start when you're first meeting with a client or potential client. How do you open that conversation? How do you know what they're looking for?
Well, I think first and foremost, the best way to find out what they're looking for is to just ask some probing questions. Now, ideally, we have a line we like to use, prepare to win, which is a Vince Lombardi quote. So ideally, you're going into a meeting with doing research on what are the things they've done, what things you can see from their previous marketing initiatives to come in with at least a perspective and doing your research to ask smarter questions. But ultimately, our belief is then ask those questions, start to get information from them, and then ideally, because we're a little unique in the kind of multi-touch point services we provide under the marketing and event experience umbrella, that we can then ask targeted questions with relevant experience in areas to be able to uncover where is the biggest opportunity to add value to what they're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And so because you do these multi-channel touch points, what percentage or what share of events does that take up, and has that changed?
What share of events in terms of
the mix
of our business?
Or their business. So it's a brand who has events as part of their mix. Is that growing? Is that shrinking? Are they working off each other in synergistic ways?
Are people embracing events even more than they've done in the past, and why?
Absolutely.
Why?
I think events, and I would say experiences, and not to get into semantics, but I think...
No, let's hear it. What you think the difference is between event and experience.
I think there's a big difference, and also with experiential marketing, I think is a misnomer a lot of times in the industry, which we could talk about. But so to me, events or experiences, depending on how someone defines it, is such a growth area because, in this distracted world of all these different things coming at consumers and everybody trying to sell them things, that authentic brand experience and connecting with people in a real tangible way, where a brand is actually not just like showing up and interrupting their life, but actually adding value to it, works. So brands are finding those connection points are then leading to a multi-channel add-ons to that through social, through other platforms to drive ROI ultimately.
Can you dig a little deeper in that?
Sure.
You're talking a lot of jargon.
Yeah.
What
exactly.
does what is an event, and what is an event? What's the difference between an event and experience? And when you say they don't really engage, what is the bad version of the experience, and what is a good version of it?
Yeah, I think the bad version is when it gets added on to perceived added value.
What does that mean? What does that mean? Actually?
So added on like a media company adding event in because they think people are going to want to check that box, but not really thinking how it all ties together in a concentrated campaign. I think a bad version of it today is also looking at it just as the number of people that are there physically. And this is a lot of brands still can't cross that hurdle of, hey, we may have 200 people here, but you're spending this amount of money. What are we doing capturing it? Is there podcasts from the location? Are we teeing up really easy social tools to share? Is there a media partner that we secure, which we do a lot of that actually? So it's totally amplified because a lot of times we're actually saying to people, I remember like someone came to us recently and said, hey, we have, $300,000. It's most of our budget. And we want to do this 2-day event in Chicago. And you start to ask, to your point, the questions of what their goals are. And we're like, wow, based on what your goals are, I would never recommend spending $300,000 for 2 days when you want to have something that's going to actually really be able to track against those. So sometimes it may sound strange because we do a lot of events and brand experiences. A lot of times we're actually questioning why they want to do events because they're looking at it from a lens that's too narrow versus how it ties into their overall campaign. And I think we've been surprised sometimes. We actually had one conversation where we're like, that doesn't make sense, so we don't want to bid. And then 2 weeks later, they came back and said, we thought about what you guys said and it made a lot of sense. So let's take a deeper look at that. So, and part of our belief with that is if you do an event just because someone wants to do an event without really looking at how it's going to impact their business, they'll be a client for 6 months or for the length of that time. And then they won't have results and they'll never want to work with you again versus creating a partnership where you're working with them through the ebbs and flows of their business for many, many years.
Right. So this is like a proactive strategy on your part for business development is to make sure that the event that you choose or the experience that you create makes sense for them.
Not even, yes, on business development, but also like, not to be corny, but what's going to work for them, right? And we've invested over the years, to your point of event, to us, we're big on like that we're like a brand experience company. And within that, a lot of times there's a core event or gathering of people together, whether that's B2B or B2C. To me, it doesn't matter. I think people can get caught up sometimes. It's about a target audience. What's that experience that comes to life? But if you can do that in a way that's looking at like how the other things tie into that, that's where you can really, and this is what's changed with brands when you talk about a Walmart or Coca-Cola or like it used to be where everybody's in their lanes and it was like, well, no, you do events, like you can't touch anything else. And that shifted because a lot of the startup companies and well-funded startups that are innovating are running circles around the bigger brands. So the bigger brands are realizing, maybe I shouldn't have 12 agencies touch this to increase my budget 12 times if 1 or 2 groups can bring this to life in an integrated way.
We have some of our friends say that that event piece is the high touch part of an experience, and it's arrogant to say that we're the centerpiece of it. So it really is all of the different channels. So you can't have an event agency. What you're saying, I guess, is true. You can't have an event agency and a digital agency. It really all is one thing now, right?
Well, you can, and a lot of times you do. We just had a meeting yesterday with a group that had 8 agencies. We were one of 8. And they're looking at their budget and they're like, we spent a ton of money and there wasn't as much as you can bring your agencies together. There wasn't one holistic integrated marketing campaign. So you end up having 8 disparate platforms trying to force fit them together. And then it's not a necessarily as successful campaign as it can be. I think the high touch point, the challenge with events related to marketers is how can you get the same scale that you can get by doing a Super Bowl spot or in a magazine or, buying an NFL broadcast. And that's always part of the look is like quality of interaction versus scale and how can you achieve both? A lot of times in short amounts of time where, there's a lot of pressure on brands to do stuff yesterday. So it's like, how do you find that mix so they're not in a panic? And because it's easy to just spend millions of dollars in traditional media and track the metrics and all of that. It's less easy to say we need to tick while everybody else tacks. And what if I think more people should say, here's $20 million. Like, give it to their creative agency, give it to their experiential agency, put it out there and say, how would you spend this 20 versus saying, oh, we have 20 million. You have $1.5 million in events. You have this here. That's backwards in our humble opinion.
Planning an event and wondering how you can give your attendees the best experience possible? Take advantage of customized meetings with Hilton that make it easier than ever to incorporate health, wellness, and great breaks. Hilton will help you build an extraordinary meeting that attendees will remember. To book your next meeting or event, go to meetings.hilton.com.
Give our listeners a sense of how you do that. Do you have an example or choose an example from a recent event to give everyone a sense of the kind of work you do and how you answer these questions strategically with an experience?
I think and this is a constantly evolving thing, because to us, the North Star is always extending out a little farther than your reach. But the biggest way we've done it is by consciously investing in people with different perspectives. So you can't do it. There was the time period where every agency all of a sudden said they did digital, and then they said they now do social, and now it's AR and VR. And then, so if you go beneath the onion layer and be like, do they really do social? Do they have staff that's their jobs that they've hired maybe from other social agencies? 90% of groups don't invest to have those things. They figure it out as they go. So we've consciously invested in people over the years as we've saw needs from clients, where the marketplace was going, to be able to then start a conversation. And our approach is we pull those people into the conversation. So if you were talking about a retail brand experience, for example, we have a division that does brand promotions, national contests, sweepstakes, digital overlays. So if we're going to be looking at how do we drive people into retail with an incentive, they're in the conversation from the start for us. We never want to be too big or too corporate-y or in too linear lines where it's like, oh no, this is your 5-person account team. Guess what? Everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses. So we're big believers of really tapping into people. We call it the accordion style account approach. There's your core team, that's the nerve center, but their ability to tap into someone who knows how to do a media partnership, who knows how to do PR, social media, like Juan, who's sitting here, is fabulous. That's where then you come back with not a bunch of ingredients for chili, but a beautiful tasting chili.
So you guys, I hear that you have about 200 people on your team.
400 total in the U.S., 200 of the legacy lead dog, because I'm in a new role now with CSM.
Now, explain a little bit about what's going on. I knew you back when you were lead dog, and it was 1999 and 2000. Yeah. And we were all scrapping and struggling. You
Absolutely.
Were, the lead dog meant what you were doing. Now you're like this big corporate entity, right?
Hopefully not big corporate entity.
Okay.
I would say nimble, hungry, challenger.
You're what the big corporations want in their portfolio, to be nimble so that they can actually extend what they do.
I think so. I mean, hopefully, and the proof will be in the pudding, we don't become that big kind of hierarchical.
So I just insulted you by mistake.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's actually why we sold to the group we sold to. So we don't want to be another just adding to revenue, adding to the mix, and of a inventory on a shelf. We wanted to join a group that's truly got all the entrepreneurs that came into the CSM family. And when I say family, our CEO works with his 2 brothers out of London. There's literally a lot of that still kind of spirit and mindset.
But does the mothership then bring you in on a lot of clients so that you have built-in client base in this world now? There
is, yeah. So one of the things why was not interested in selling to groups over the years was felt like that premise was a lot of smoke and mirrors. That, you're going to come into our network, we're going to leverage all these existing things. And it never really felt authentic, partly because I'd say, well, why is this agency over here in your network hiring us then when we have competitors within your group? And they never really had good answers for that. So with CSM, the beauty of it is we're CSM Sports and Entertainment. VCCP is our ad agency that's in creative campaigns, a lot of digital social work. So we're able to because the people have connected and actually like each other, when Mubadala, our largest client in the Middle East, is looking to do things in San Francisco.
What is the name of that client?
Mubadala.
And what do they do?
There's a sovereign wealth fund in the Middle East
Okay.
that's investing in different companies. So when we bring them to life out in California at the Silicon Valley Tennis Classic, it's with communication, it's with understanding their goals already, and then bringing the right people, the right seat on the bus, so to speak, to bring the quality to life. Because similar to what we were talking about with Ted and Honey, if you have a trusted relationship and you add some other piece in some other region and you don't bring that same brand experience or what someone's come to know from your agency, they're very quickly not going to be a client.
Mm-hmm. But let's get back to the question I asked earlier about choose an example. Let's find out, what have you done? Tell us a recent event or experience that you want to share, how you brought it to life.
Sure. I think on those lines of global, so we just were the executive producers of the Rugby Sevens World Cup at AT&T Park in San Francisco. And it's a good example of multi kind of touch points of value proposition. So what does that mean, executive producing? So everything when you walked into the stadium, the experience from the announcers to the music, to the ceremonies, to the introductions of teams, to the kids coming out with flags, we created that, and then we're on site producing it in close coordination with NBC, the broadcast partner. We also handled Tudor Watches hospitality for all of their clients that they brought in from around the world on site in the experience, not just at AT&T Park, but how do you bring that experience to life in San Francisco around the region? It's a good example. Tudor's our client in London. They got introduced to us. And as much as you become, to your point, of big groups, clients still want to know you have the real local presence. So I loved when Tudor's saying, well, who's in San Francisco that's got relevant hospitality experience to manage our business? Then the good news is we're like, Lisa Heinowitz worked for a catering chef company and has been with us 4 years, and that's all she does is focus on hospitality. So then you can deliver what their need is. Now, separately with that event, we consulted on the broadcast strategy for NBC. We sold millions of dollars of sponsors bringing brands into the sport because Rugby Sevens is a new experience. So really kind of touched it from all different sides of that experience. And when you do that, then we think you have better control of your destiny and can look the client in the eye. And there's obviously risk and opportunity to this of we're the ones who are fully responsible for something, which we'd much prefer versus being part of one of 10 agencies and then having a lot of rationale for why something didn't work. Kind of have a belief of rationales for wimps.
What do you do? What is one of the things I found about our industry is that while everybody has plans and strategy and all that, it all comes down to that Maya Angelou thing about how you made them feel. What do you do as an experiential agency and a client like that to evoke the feeling? Like, what are the types of things that really work?
Yeah, well, big Maya Angelou fan. We've worked with Oprah for years, so Super Soul Sunday, Oprah's Live Your Best Life experiences. And that, like, Oprah embodies it, Maya Angelou. It's like, look, whether it's an event or a podcast or a 30-second spot, everything's about the emotions you evoke, right?
Right.
Now, events and live experiences can do that more effectively than a lot of other mediums. And that's why I think it's growing and people are realizing there's so much stuff coming at you. If you can get people in the right environment on their terms and create experiences based on their wants and needs, that's very powerful. But I think then it goes back to the little details. So you can sit in a boardroom and you can present to a Fortune 500 company and create this great campaign. But then if you get to San Francisco and you're checking into the hotel and your credentials not there in an organized way and the transportation doesn't work, well, then guess what? That presentation of what feeling you're trying to evoke quickly just churns for the person who's upset. And part of like events, we always look at events of like things are always going to happen, right? A truck's going to break down on the side of a highway, technology goes down. So then it's about having the people with the right experience to be able to pivot and respond so that that's all behind the curtain and the consumers never see that.
Right. What I'm trying to get at is what is the strategic feeling that you get to? Like, we're assuming that all the logistics will work and we know that the feelings could go off the rails if that doesn't work. But what do you do when they come into the stadium that make them feel like this is something? What is the lead dog magic? What are Dan's rules about this?
Sure. I think you want to keep it simple. A lot of times
That's
now,
number one, right? Is that what you say all the time?
I think keep it simple because a lot of times now with technology, people can over-technologize, if that's a word, of experiences. And they'll bring all these different pieces, and then the reality is they'll spend so much money and the person's not using it if it's not in a clear, simple way. You want to educate. So rugby sevens, there's a lot of core rugby fans there. And then there's a lot of people that are going because it's a World Cup event. So you want to be able to have different avenues of communication depending on how much embraced someone is with the content.
How did you do that at that event?
So you do that with materials, you do that with apps, you do that with the script, being very conscious to not being a script just for someone who's followed rugby their whole life, and really thinking through, okay, if you're going to rugby for the first time, Beth, like, are you clueless about the rules? How do you get that communicated? How is that visually done with the scoreboards? How is that done in advance in the communication? So really looking at, we say a lot of times pre, during, post, a lot of times people get so focused on the during that they forget the pre and post. And so often I think the greatest continued opportunity for ROI is in the post, because you do these experiences, you create this feeling, and then don't have that stop. So we say that's like starting the conversation, and then brands that can effectively keep that conversation going without being salesy, the biggest thing now is where are brands adding value to an experience? So our Diet Coke campaign, to try and really connect with millennials, we don't want to do traditional sponsorships and just show up with the signage and official property of or official brand of X. No, we want to go to what millennials are passionate about and add to that experience. So when we're doing pop-up concerts with So Far Sounds, it's not as much about, the Coca-Cola logo needs to be this big. It's how is Diet Coke actually being experienced in a way that they're like, this is cool. Actually, this tastes great. It's not necessarily just my mom's Diet Coke. So thinking through all those things, and ultimately back to the Maya Angelou, it's that's where environmental design comes in. So our design team's looking at that. That's where throughput, how many people can experience each part of it. So when you start getting into the logistics side.
So is there an experience that you're talking throughput, you're running people through something? What is that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the goals and saying, how much time
at the Coke thing, at the Diet Coke, at whatever you're talking about. What was give us an example of
sure.
the actual.
So we
thing.
we created these curated pop-up concerts with So Far Sounds, and then
what is it So Far?
So Far Sounds is a really interesting startup. No, it's interesting. And there's two groups we did this with. Infatuation was another one. So Far Sounds are these incredible pop-up concerts that you don't know in advance where it's going to be. And then they distribute the information. It's first come, first serve. So limited number. So they create that scarcity. Limited number of people can sign up. And then they have performers that you don't know who's going to be there. But it's in unique locations.
What is So Far? What is spell it?
SOFAR. So Far Sounds.
So Far, and that's a thing that I just never heard of.
Yeah, and another one that's really interesting. Have you heard of Infatuation? Mm-hmm. So Infatuation are these kind of millennial themed culinary experiences that also pop up in different spaces. So, I think more and more a trend is okay, yes, you can be ubiquitous and you sponsor the World Cup or huge events, right? And there's clear value to that, especially for global brands that want scale, that want experiences that can touch as the far reaches local regions. But then there's all these innovative startups, and that when you're capturing experiences in the right way, the amplification of that through social and PR and earned media, the corny or the simple way that we look at it is when you're creating great experiences, part of the proof of that is how much it resonates in other channels. It's a lot of our media launches, why we're having knock on wood success. We'll launch Hulu Handmaid's Tale at South by Southwest. And
wait, say that. What was that?
So we
go into an example of what that
sure.
means. You
can read about that in BizBash as well.
Of course,
something we covered.
Yeah, you guys. Thank you for the coverage.
But talk about what that was. The parade.
So this was actually 40 women.
Yeah, I used that.
In character. Yeah. So actresses that were never seen out of character in the outfits from the show, bringing the show to life with solemn walking around, going up to windows, all over Austin, Texas. But then our PR team is actively creating that story, crafting and sharing that story with others. So it's not for us, success was not just impacting the people in Austin. Success was very much being B2B and BizBash, being in, other media channels, but consumer press, and having it timed so that ideally with, broadcasts, that first engagement, first show is the key. So how are we creating interesting content, showing up again where the target audience is already consuming content to resonate, to then have an action?
What are you calling that concept?
I think
you're making it up as you go along, I assume, but there is this is something that
I don't think we're
no.
There's always a part of you're making up as you go along in terms of coming up with the right idea for that.
Right.
But I think one of the fun things for us is we're not going to them saying this has to be an event experience. We're saying what's the best thing to achieve their goals. So for Netflix, the week of, it ended up being a 3-minute content reality show we executive produced. That was a 3-minute show that we distributed through social. No event components. So really.
But the parade thing, the idea of the parade
I'd call that more like the Hulu Handmaid's Tale is more, you kind of buzz guerrilla marketing. But for us, it's layered over with conscious, concentrated PR and social strategies to have that become success is national, not just Austin, Texas.
We're going to take a little break and come right back after this message from Hilton. So when's the big event? Hilton's here for planners with their exclusive customized meetings. Become a wow maker and save time by letting Hilton help you present an extraordinary event, one that leads to memorable and meaningful connections. Visit meetings.hilton.com and let Hilton help you.
So getting back to the way you engage guests with the Rugby Sevens, it was thinking about people who know rugby and those who don't. Tell me how that changes when you're dealing with super fans. I think Oprah might be an example for that, right?
Definitely an example with Oprah's super fans. And we've worked on ABC. I remember a couple who came from their wedding to our super soap series, Fun in the Sun, for ABC Soap Stars, because they were obsessed with the cast of the ABC soaps. So I think when you're dealing with super fans, you first and foremost want to embrace their fandom. So for our Oprah event, I'll never forget being in San Francisco and being in Kansas City, and it would be the Thursday at the convention center setting up, and there'd be people coming by who flew in, mom and their daughter, for an anniversary celebration or some moment, that it becomes this signature special experience. So you want to handle that with care on every communication touch point. So they want to have the right information in advance. They want to make sure they're not missing Gayle King. So part of it's the planning and mapping out. And to the point earlier of how many people are in each room, like if someone's there to see Marianne Williamson and they can't get into that session, there can be some freak out moments. So part of it, kind of classic good customer service, coming up with solutions, but those solutions are mitigated if you plan in advance. So a lot of it is creating those touch points so people can walk away with an experience of a lifetime. And sometimes we say to people, like, when I run into people, they kind of look at me funny. It's like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, we help people's dreams come true, which is kind of how we look at it. And so, but the super fans, they're the Michelin star, right? They're the ones with the white glove that's going to scrutinize everything. So we take that very seriously. I sat outside Radio City at the 10th anniversary, hearing a lot of feedback from some of our super fans, what they think about the show, how you can apply it. One thing I think with event experiences, to that point, focus groups are great, surveys are great, but there's nothing like walking around and talking to people at a live event experience. I became fast friends with a lot of the women at the Oprah events by being like, hey, what do you think of this experience? What could be better? And not just asking for what's well done, be like, what do you think of the food? What do you think of how long the sessions are? And really taking that feedback to then apply it to the next year. And then you create a relationship with those super fans where they're not paid influencers. There's a lot of out there. They're the best influencers.
So another Dan rule is observational research trumps surveys.
Yeah. I love, to the ninth degree, like going up to when we're in Miami for NASCAR, created the concert on the beach. I love going in and talking to the hotel staff and like, hey, what are you seeing this weekend? Who's coming? Like, how do we get like that level of detail where you can get into the local touch is very different than, again, mapping out in a boardroom.
Do you want going back to superfans for a second? Is that part of your formula for most clients, identifying superfans?
I think you want to, like what we like.
Whatever it is, whether it's a bank or whether it's...
Yeah, I think part of it, in terms of creating a campaign and event experiences, part of superfans, you want to think both strategically, both revenue streams. How do we maximize superfans? You also want to look at the level of risk depending on attendance of who are the folks that are going to fill up, if there's 5,000 people that can attend an event, do you think 2,000 will be superfans? If 5,000 are superfans, then we probably craft the experience different than if 5,000 people were brand new to Oprah for the first time. A big part of it is then also how you create a special experience. So we've done WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment's fan experience, 60,000 plus people at WrestleMania for years, right? So they've tremendous amount of superfans. So we've crafted experiences where you can have your, bacon biceps breakfast with some of the wrestlers. You have the fast pass, so that kind of like Disney where you can go into the lines and get quicker to autographs. Like really, how do you take care of in special ways the people that have supported you consistently for years?
But you're saying it also doesn't matter. B2B is also a superfan world too, if you do B2B events in some form.
Absolutely. B2B is classic. Like I'll never forget being at a conference in Europe in Versailles, actually, which didn't suck.
No,
but that classic of like, the event had gone great. It was 200-person conference. We had a dinner at the Palace at Versailles that I'll never forget.
The word I'll never forget is the holy grail for your business.
Yeah, ideally, right? You want to create those bucket list moments for people. And from our standpoint, it's that balance of we want to not be seen, right? Hopefully no one's ever being like, who's this brand experience agency lead dog, except for when like Sesame Street's our client, because they walked through Grand Central Terminal and saw our Ben & Jerry's huge cereal bowl and how we were running that event. And they're like, this is unique. This is different. I want to find the group behind that. I mean, we love that. For us, there's no better, recognition than Brookfield Place. We're their agency of record now from the work we did with America's Cup down there. So when someone actually just gets to see what you do versus some, fluff presentation, because a lot of people can present stuff like who delivers on a day-to-day basis. But so back to the Paris event, always thinking of the scenario planning, and we've got a transportation company. Oh, we got it covered. We're good. Like when there's like that super fan, in this case, like the most important client of our client who's getting a car pickup at 5 a.m. There's times where you have that, like you trust people, but you have that like backup. So like, and our team was pretty exhausted for the event. So I set my alarm and went down early in the morning. And sure enough, the car was totally on the wrong side of the hotel. He would have had this amazing experience. And then all of a sudden he's rushing to get to his flight and would have left with a stressful taste in his mouth. So those little details with event experiences, everything from clear signage and directional, how when you're at a gala event, like how do you engage? Is it really easy to donate through the app? Like what are those things where you can make it easier for someone to participate?
So as the head of this company, are you watching everything? What is your job when you go to an event? What do you do?
I don't eat or drink. It's one of our cardinal rules. You never like participating in your own event.
It's a Dan rule.
Superstitious. One of our clients always we'd be 2 days into a 3-day B2B conference and she'd be like, oh, come join us at dinner, like have some wine. And we're like, maybe when the boxes are being packed, when everything's done well.
So is that a tale to all of the people that work for you and other agencies that if they're participating, they're dead?
We have some cardinal rules that let the other agencies continue to do that. Cause as soon as you start to think you're in good shape and you take your eye off the ball is when something bad's going to happen. And it's not just for the plans. Like I remember that Versailles event, our caterer was like wanting to take care of us and set up this like amazing dinner and the catacombs of the building. And our team was getting like a little excited about that. But we had a motivational speaker who climbed the 7 highest peaks in the world that was speaking at that event. And yes, it was supposed to be after dessert. But guess what? The CMO decided he wanted it to be like at a different time. So if you're not on that ball and you're not prepared to like react to the needs of a client, you're, a C+ agency.
So then you were able to pull off that request, right?
No, we got fired. No.
So you pulled that off. So your team didn't have that experience necessarily, which sounds like was the right call. How do you celebrate wins afterwards internally?
You have to celebrate the wins because as an agency, look, clients always write, like, how high can you jump? Hey, that meeting that we needed that document 4 days ago, now we need it tomorrow morning. So it's not easy what we're doing, especially it just gets harder and harder from a standpoint of the expectations and the pressure, especially Fortune 500 companies are having their internal pressure. So we're just responding to the pressures that they're having.
Well, that's interesting. You say that where are the pressures coming from? More people are interested in the event side? Is that why the pressure is there? Or is it the return? Or is it the
I think there's pressure in general for companies' obsession with growth. I hate the lines that are always used, but like the average CMO tenure is 18 months. So someone comes in, doesn't want to take a lot of risks. They also don't want to be associated with something else from the previous CMO, even if it worked well, which is a classic. They just want to change for change's sake. But ultimately, they're in like survival mode. And if it's in a changing industry like the media, and we've done a ton of print magazine events and experiences, like they're scrambling to like maintain their business. And it's really hard to do that and try and innovate. So they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to get fired. Like they go the safe choice, which then exacerbates the downward spiral. You've got to be able to take risks within changing environments. So for us, like celebrating wins, like we are such perfectionists. Like I'll correct new staff if they're like flawless execution. Nothing is ever flawless execution. I worked for David Stern at the NBA, and if there's one thing instilled in me, like that doesn't mean you don't celebrate wins, but you can always be thinking about what can we do to raise the bar the next time. But part of celebrating wins is also we're not robots, and like things are going to happen, and not. It's not the worst thing in the world if something happens. It's how you respond and making sure that doesn't happen 3 times again. But part of it, we're still a family. Like I, came in the office this morning with a donut, a huge scone, and a croissant for random acts of kindness. Like when there's an event and like we're working our butts off, like we have a thing at Fox headquarters today. You've got to do those thank yous on a personal touch level. So that can be on a scale. We celebrate with the whole team in fun ways. It's also the little things. Like when Leah was kicking butt on something recently and saying, hey, you know what? She's a newlywed. Take your husband to like a fancy hotel in New York and expense it. And knock on wood, like those things only can happen if you're performing financially as well, because I'll quickly get fired if we keep doing those hotels and then we, miss our goals. Right. But life's too short. You gotta stop and smell the coffee.
Before we end, I have one sort of bigger picture question. And that is, when we started our businesses 20 years ago, we started at the same time. I felt that
12 years old, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That the event industry was kind of sitting at the children's table for Thanksgiving. Do you feel optimistic that CEOs and CMOs are seeing the value of the face-to-face relationship as, whether they can measure the ROI or not, that it's really important? Are you optimistic about that or pessimistic about that?
Completely optimistic.
That's the right answer.
No, and I think like the world's changed, and I think a lot of it's because of startups that have kicked the butts of bigger companies, and they're realizing, oh, you only had one agency doing all that. And I do think, to me, if there's like CMOs that were listening to this, it'd be like, give us your budget, give the same budget to your other agencies, and see who comes back with the best integrated plan. So to me, it's about thinking through what's best for someone. Now, because we do a lot of events, we could come back with 100% nothing for events. One of our longest standing clients came to us with a $2 million budget to do 5 events that were going to be like 2 hours each and fly all their employees in. And based on their goals to connect more with the company's culture, we said, that is a waste of money. And we can show you what that looks like, but we highly recommend not doing that. They didn't. Saved over $1 million, created a whole digital campaign that was 3 months long versus 2 hours with a hot dog hors d'oeuvre and a quick simulcast. So.
And it worked.
And then they're a client for 7 years versus their CFO being pissed that they overspent for something and what was the ROI.
Great example. Thanks so much for joining us, Dan. Before we let you go, tell our listeners how they can reach you and learn more about what you do.
I'm in Brooklyn a lot of times Ted and Honey, I used to be out all the time, but they can reach me at dan@leaddogmarketing.com. You are one of the most responsive followers when you email you, even though you have all these 400 people. I must say that I have always been able to get you to email me back in a minute. Thank you.
That's a compliment.
Twitter, Instagram?
It's funny. I like to do things that feel right, and I think it speaks to, the experiences as well. So I'm more of an Instagram guy, but it's really not work related. I'll repost some work things, but it's more my son, Jackson, who's 9, is a crazy, fun dancer. So check out my Instagram if you want to see an amazing 9-year-old doing some the floss and dab. He's got some serious moves.
What is your Instagram?
Good question.
Dan Mannix.
I think it's Lead Dog 6.
Lead Dog 6. I will try it.
And then I like LinkedIn a lot as well. LinkedIn is just in terms of feeling like you can keep a pulse of what's going on in the industry and trends. And I'd be remiss to not say that, starting Lead Dog in 99, it's kind of awesome to see, and kudos to you because, starting a media company and building it and pivoting before it's too late and being ahead of the curve with what you're doing with AR and the magazine and this podcast. I've always admired what you guys have done. And I'm not an advertiser, so I'm not giving you a plug in that way. But congratulations on what you guys have built.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Dan.
So I'm back to wrap this up. One of the questions when thinking about client sponsorship was, where are brands adding value to an experience? That is such a key question, and a good answer can also touch on other important buzzwords like engagement and authenticity. I'm also glad we got a chance to talk about super fans. The first rule, he said, is to embrace their fandom. Fans at Oprah's events are a great example, but I'll add that this is something that anyone who activates at Comic-Con should be interested in. And there are probably also corollaries in the world of trade shows and associations where you have passionate people there for a B2B experience. So the last thing I'll call out is Dan revealing that he's doing his own on-the-spot research with event attendees. This is so amazing. It's, it might not be a scientific approach, but he's getting real answers in real time. So and maybe some of you listening also do this. Feel free to tweet us with how it works for you. Finally, this is our last regular episode of Gather Geeks for 2018. So with some free time in your listening schedule, I'm going to recommend revisiting our archives to check out episodes you may have missed. We had a whole series with celebrity event designers, including Mindy Weiss, Jess Gordon, Brian Raffinelli, and Colin Cowie, among others. We delved into event strategy at Walmart, Condé Nast, and Univision, and talked about issues such as inequality for women in the trade show industry and what they're doing to change that. We've gotten the scoop on things as diverse as event tech, table linens, event entertainment, and keynote speakers. So much event intelligence, all in just the past year. So check it out. Thanks for being great listeners all year long. And I'm going to close this out by saying, gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the Gather Geeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of Gather Geeks. Until then, gather on.
This episode was brought to you by Go West, the must-attend event in Canada for event professionals. If you are an event planner, use coupon code GATHERGEEKS to attend for $99. Register at gowestevent.ca. That's gowestevent.ca. I will see you there. David Adler here.